in the stillness. Let your mind rest and relax in a way that it really can't when you're constantly on. So that role of silence is super important. Hey there. I'm at my alma mater today, Vassar College. I was invited to workshop Move, Think, Rest as part of a special weekend that the Alana Center has organized all around wellness and purpose. And first of all, a big thanks to Vassar for inviting me to do this, and for everyone who showed up for this workshop. I often do a lot of speaking about the Move, Think, Rest principles, but to actually think through how to make these principles actionable and real was super special. And as always, I learn a lot when I really get back into teaching and facilitating mode. So one of the things that I was left thinking about a lot based on people's questions and insights and what came alive for people during the workshop was the difference between what Move, Think, Rest looks like ideally, written on the page when you have it all mapped out, versus an actual day where things don't always go to plan. I like to remind people that plans are fiction. I didn't think of that expression, but I love it because I'm pretty A-type personality. I wake up every day with a to-do list. But when I heard that phrase, that plans are fiction, it helped me to take on a much more adaptive approach to the ways that I think about how my day is going to turn out. So given the differences between how we might want to integrate movement and thought and rest versus the reality, here's just a few thoughts about how we can make Move, Think, Rest really come alive in actuality when you have interruptions, when you do find that your schedule gets squeezed, when you don't have time for that hour-long lunch break. And I just want to also just kind of recap what I mean by movement and thought and rest. So movement in this human-centered operating system is not just about going to the gym, although if that's your jam, if that's something that you can do on a regular basis, amazing. Movement is about what I call movement hygiene. And so it's all about making sure that you are standing up regularly, that you actually are not seated for more than a 30 to 40 minute increment. The research that I learned about from Dr. John Medina, he is a neuroscientist out in Washington State, is this great series of books called Brain Rules. And he writes about how we really shouldn't be sedentary for more than 30 or 40 minutes at a time. So in terms of movement hygiene, on a realistic day, you just got to set timers. And it doesn't mean that you go on that 5-minute walk, but it does mean that you are making sure that you are setting a timer for 40 minutes at a time, that you're going to be working sedentary, sitting down, and then standing up. It could be just a minute stretch. It could be just standing by the window for a daydream break, which you'll hear about a little bit more when I talk about what thought looks like and not ideal work day. But any kind of movement that reminds us that the head, the brain, is not disembodied from the body, and that the spinal cord is an extension of the brain. So any opportunity that we have to integrate movement helps this notion come alive that when we move, our ideas move. So in a not ideal day, in a less than ideal day, when you find yourself on a lot of calls that require you to be seated, any opportunity you have to make sure that you're standing, you're moving to a different part of the building or your house if you work from your home, is going to be really helpful for you to do that. You see, okay, well, on a college campus, it's so cool to see how people are getting from class to class by, skateboarding, for example. But that's also another interesting idea. Is there a different modality of movement that you can integrate to do an errand instead of getting in the car? Can you walk there? Can you be on a scooter? I have an e-bike, which I love. I remember when I first got the e-bike, I thought, man, is this going to be kind of like cheating because I can pop on the assistance to go up a hill? It actually helps me to ride my bike more regularly. So any opportunity you have to integrate fun and joy into the way you move, that also counts. But thinking about using a timer to making sure that you're moving for short increments of time, maybe you're standing, you're walking. It doesn't have to be for 30 minutes, an hour, so that you don't beat yourself up if you don't get it all in. It's just being conscientious that you are integrating some sort of kinesthetic way to get your blood flowing so that you are recharged emotionally. And that's the other thing. The impact on our nervous system is incredible, because the other thing is happy that we're walking. As I'm walking right now, I'm feeling the sunshine. I'm looking at the blue sky. I feel the wind on my face, so that when I re-enter a building, man, the serotonin that was released, all of the positive hormones, the endorphins, help to reset my nervous system, help me to reset the way that I'm feeling, and does wonders for my neuroplasticity. So that's movement on a less than ideal way. When it comes to thought in this framework, I'm not thinking about thought in terms of just cognitive clarity, but how do we get to the cognitive clarity? And that is through what I call backcasting and forecasting. Backcasting is like reflection and memory and metacognition. Why do I think the way I think about XYZ? Forecasting is about inspiration, and it's about asking new and different sorts of questions. So on a less than ideal day, when you are really crunched for time, one way to get that backcasting and that forecasting in is, can you do a very short journal entry reflecting on a specific moment in time in your life? Doesn't have to be work related, but just that reflection. And here's a way I'd like you to think about that. I call it your inventory of courage, especially when you're working on something pretty challenging at work that may have you feeling a little paralyzed with fear and analysis paralysis. Take stock through your own inventory of courage. Is there a moment that you can reflect on, going back more than 10 years ago to your childhood, where you realized the seed of your courage to do difficult, challenging things was planted? Put on a timer. Can you just journal about it for 5 minutes? That's a form of backcasting. And then forecasting, it could come from just watching something that's really inspiring to you, listening to inspiring music, whatever that is for you, to spark new and different sorts of thinking. And it's really important to be able to have a conversation with someone to spark that forecasting. So being here at Vassar, I just came out of a wonderful catch-up meeting with President Betsy Bradley. And she said, we were just talking about how students are doing on the campus, and how I was just really being my pragmatic optimist and saying, that we are in the imagination era. And she was referencing an example of how creativity happens when we're in the crawl spaces of life. And I love that. And it inspired my thinking. It's a different way to say what I often talk about in terms of creativity loves constraints. So having an impromptu conversation with someone doesn't need to take a long time. And then the rest part, when you don't have an ideal day, let's say you have a day where you're shuttling people back and forth in the car, or you're back and forth in between meetings. One way to introduce rest, micro rest for yourself, don't put the radio on or a podcast on in the car. Just simply be in the stillness. Let your mind rest and relax in a way that it really can't when you're constantly on. I notice that when I'm listening to podcasts, while they're really interesting, they're not maybe about the work at hand, it's still requiring me to think. So that role of silence is super important. So thinking about integrating movement, thought, and rest during a day that feels packed, during a day where your energy may feel a little sapped, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it does take intentionality. It takes moments for us to be aware, and we can help ourselves do that through a timer. We can help ourselves do that by having a blank piece of paper and a pen at the ready. And notice I said journal with pen and paper, not just typing something out. There's something really awesome that happens when we go analog again, where we're touching, we're tactile with paper and pen. As a matter of fact, the workshop that I gave today, movement, thought, and rest. 2 moments during this workshop, we were working with paper and a Sharpie and folding the paper in different ways and then drawing a circle in the middle and identifying an opportunity or challenge and then following a prompt to write out these ideas in really simple terms and forms is everything. It's a way to break from the deluge of technology that we're constantly immersing ourselves in. And a lot of times that technology is great because it helps us to do things quickly, but finding ways to break that up is really important. And I'll just leave you with a fun thing that we did today on the workshop that helps to integrate movement, thought, and rest on a less than ideal way. We danced the bachata. Now, I taught the bachata in a really basic way, which is basically, let me see, it's just 1, 2, 3, tap, 1, 2, 3, tap. I'm doing a really oversimplification, but it was fun. We laughed. We were shaking up ourselves physically. We were helping to tap into different neurosynapses in the brain so that the next exercise I asked people to do back to their seats, I asked them how they felt after having danced bachata. It took like 7 minutes, wasn't long. They were more relaxed. They tapped into how they were feeling about the problem or challenge that they had been tackling. And that's so important. So give yourself a dance break. It doesn't have to be in public, but whatever it is for you that sparks that joy, that gets your mind off the challenge at hand, you will be amazed at how you return to your work much more focused, much more revived, and just able to unlock something that was just stymieing you before. A lot of this is because you're tapping into the default mode network of the brain. The default mode network comes alive when we tap out of the world and get into our body. So just to recap, when you have a really packed day and you want ways to integrate movement, thought, and rest that make sense, that are not going to overtax you in time, for movement, do a dance break. Make sure that you set a timer for those 30 to 40-minute increments in your standing. For thought, have a blank piece of paper and pen at hand so that you can journal, so that you can maybe use as a prompt this idea of your inventory of courage. And for rest, do daydream breaks. Just make sure you're stepping away. I'm going to step away now and have a cup of tea. Thanks so much for listening, and tap below for more tips and resources.